campaign. So she got her records switched.
I visited Pakistan with part of a group of Democratic Party officials and met with General Zia. He looked at me and he said, "The worst mistake of my life was allowing your friend to live." And I related this story to Benazir, and she looked at me without any expression and she said, "He's right."
President Zia was on board a C-130 transport plane heading from Baghawalpur to Lahore. Shortly after takeoff, his plane exploded, killing the president and all those aboard.
It was entirely an army affair. His flight was managed by the military, security was military, everything was military. No civilian could go near it.
The death of Zia-ul-Haq, which has never been explained, box of mangoes that exploded on his C-130 Hercules and killed the American ambassador to Pakistan, the president of Pakistan, Zia-ul-Haq, the chief military attaché of the US Embassy. And out of this came pressure for democratic government.
No one was going to stop her from there onwards. It was an unstoppable campaign.
The elections were November '89 and she had the baby in September.
The crowds surround the hospital. And while everything is happening, you can hear Jiye Bhutto, hollowed out. And then the first grandson of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto is born. And she becomes Prime Minister 3 months later.
They danced in the streets as the final returns came in, returns that gave Benazir Bhutto's Pakistan People's Party a nearly 2-to-1 majority over any other political group.
People of Pakistan have elected the Pakistan People's Party with the largest single majority in the entire country. Even my own husband thought I was under delusions that I could beat a military dictator. And he thought that when she wakes up and finds out that it's all wrong and she can't, then I'll be there to console her. Little knowing that I was the one who had to console him when I won.
At a very young age, 35, Benazir Bhutto became not just the youngest prime minister of a Muslim-majority state, more importantly, she became the first woman.
मैं बेनज़ीर भुट्टो
सिद्ध के दिल से हल्फ उठाती हूँ कि मैं मुसलमान हूँ अल्लाह ताला की वहदत
First day when she takes oath as the Prime Minister and we walk out of that hall, she says, "I have avenged my father today."
On the first day in office, she freed all political prisoners. She made the media free of censorship. She allowed for student unions. It was a fundamental opening up of Pakistan after a decade of repression.
Tiny things improved the lives of people. She was the one who gave water, drinking water to these villages. She was the one who brought electricity.
She built 48,000 primary and secondary schools. In terms of health care, she ended polio in Pakistan, completely eliminated it.
One thing that Benazir was very proud of was her women's police stations. It sounds like nothing, but for a woman in Pakistan, it can spell a dreadful fate to be in an all-male police station.
She had great force to change not only Pakistan, but change the world and change how Islamic women viewed themselves and how Islamic men viewed Islamic women and how children viewed their mothers and how brothers viewed their sisters and how sisters viewed themselves.
When I first became Prime Minister, I wanted to show that a woman could be as good as a man. Mrs. Golda Meir and Mrs. Thatcher and Mrs. Indira Gandhi were all known for being strong as men. But I think it's important to be a woman because a woman brings nurturing aspects.
Bakhtawa was born when Benazir Bhutto was seated prime minister. I remember she chaired a cabinet meeting late in one afternoon, and she gave birth to her daughter the next morning.
She believed in equality, and she treated herself like that. Like, a lot of the times you'd come in the room and you'd see this leader, you know, this woman, and all these men following behind. And, you know, she didn't see herself as any different.
President Bush had her as the first state visitor of his administration.
These guys are the dangerous ones here.
Members of the Congress, it is my great privilege, and I deem it a high honor and personal pleasure to present to you Her Excellency Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto, Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
We set as our focus reconciliation, not retribution. Some claimed to fear revenge, revenge against the murderers and the torturers, revenge against those who subverted constitutional law. But, ladies and gentlemen, there was no revenge for them. And for dictators across the world, democracy is the greatest revenge.
She had the position of prime minister, but she had very little power. She learned the details of the Pakistani nuclear program from the United States. She had a plurality in the National Assembly, not a majority. Second, the president was a crony of Zia-ul-Haq's and was very hostile to her. The military was very suspicious of her and completely unwilling to accept orders from a young woman.
A then general in uniform asks for an appointment with me and says the army doesn't like saluting a woman, so if she could make you prime minister, we would accommodate and there wouldn't be a problem. The people of Pakistan have voted Benazir Bhutto in as prime minister of Pakistan. What about them? And he gets really offended.
There were attempts by the ISI in terms of public relations to damage her. And one was the creation of this title for Asif of Mr. 10%. This is 3 weeks before the election.
That's when I become politicized.
I'm not intelligent enough to run the show as such. It is her show. It's just that the opposition always needs something to hit us with. And this is one of their newfound phrases.
The civil-military bureaucracy of Pakistan has, in a concerted manner, tainted every politician, in many cases, totally wrongfully.
Corruption is what dogs all of these politicians.
Asif's reputation, I think, was permanently damaged from this campaign.
They could not, on the other hand, wish away her base of support. Then they tried to contain her influence by supporting rival politicians.
Nawaz Sharif was essentially introduced into politics during the period of General Zia-ul-Haq.
He was Zia's protege and became a player.
He came onto the national scene as part of a coalition of Islamic parties that was put together by the Inter-Services Intelligence to oppose Benazir Bhutto.
Mr. Nawaz Sharif became Chief Minister of Punjab, and from day one, he started defying the orders of the federal government.
The PMLN, controlling the Punjab, was clearly trying to take over.
So her entire period in power was spent fighting battles.
Unsurprisingly, within 18 months of being in office, she hadn't solved all of the problems in Pakistan and was certainly vulnerable to political criticism from a lot of different quarters.
There was no plan. The entire focus was on getting Zia out and getting elected. And once you actually got there, you know, there wasn't a plan.
Her whole focus was on the struggle for democracy, for getting rid of the dictatorship. And frankly, I don't think her party thought much about what they would do once they were in power, and anyhow, they were just barely in power. So they really tied her hands in terms of what she could do.
The ISI was very active. Their sole aim was to displace her. They did not want her to stay there. They didn't even want to give her a month.
She always used to say then that we were in office, not in power. Shortly after that, her government was removed by the army.
Disqualification is really very meaningless. I won't be the first leader to be disqualified.
So very rapidly they removed her from power, and Nawaz Sharif came in.
Well, after 20 months in office, she was deposed, ostensibly for corruption. But that's what they say about everyone. It becomes an excuse when a government is inconvenient.
I do not believe that she was personally corrupt. But I also know that the standard way to go after Pakistani politicians is to allege corruption.
It was incredibly disappointing because people had had all these hopes.
It was a time of acute disappointment for Pakistanis, I think, because she didn't do very much.
My first term, we were very inexperienced. Certainly we made mistakes, but we were sincere in our intent, sincere in our purpose.
I mean, we are expecting one individual, and that individual who I now think was alone, totally alone. Yes, she had this political body, but she was head and shoulders above everybody else. Maybe that was her tragedy. That was the tragedy of the Bhuttos, that nobody around them could match them.
I get arrested after the first government falls.
He was being held hostage to her political career, and we knew that from the very beginning.
Her husband has consistently been demonized. It was made to seem that she was a princess, he was a playboy. Every little thing, whether it was right or wrong, would just get excessive play.
They offered so many times for these trumped-up charges to be dropped if she would agree to not be in politics.